For most of recorded history, knowledge was never regarded as a collection of facts. It was regarded as a living inheritance, something received, preserved, interpreted, and passed forward from one generation to the next. Across the ancient world, long before the rise of modern universities, before libraries became public institutions, and before information could be distributed to millions with the press of a button, certain forms of knowledge occupied a different position within human society. They were treated not merely as useful information, but as something capable of shaping the character, perception, and destiny of those who encountered them. The civilizations of Egypt, Greece, Persia, India, China, and countless others emerged under vastly different conditions, spoke different languages, worshipped different gods, and developed unique cultural traditions. Yet beneath these visible differences, historians, philosophers, and seekers have repeatedly noticed a curious pattern. Certain symbols appear again and again. Certain stories return in remarkably similar forms. Certain ideas seem to travel across centuries, surviving the collapse of kingdoms, the destruction of temples, the rise of new religions, and the transformation of entire civilizations. The persistence of these patterns raises a question that has fascinated thinkers for generations. Are these merely coincidences of human imagination, or do they point towards something deeper? An underlying body of wisdom that has expressed itself through many cultures while never belonging exclusively to any one of them. Few books have explored that question with the scope, ambition, and intellectual curiosity of the secret teachings of all ages. First published in 1928 by Manly P. Hall, the work quickly distinguished itself from ordinary studies of mythology, religion, and philosophy. Rather than examining ancient traditions as isolated subjects, Hall approached them as fragments of a much larger picture. To him, the myths of antiquity, the symbols carved into forgotten monuments, the teachings of mystery schools, the language of sacred geometry, the practices of alchemy, the philosophy of Pythagoras, the writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, and the rituals of secret fraternities were not disconnected curiosities scattered throughout history. They were clues pointing toward a shared intellectual and spiritual heritage that had influenced humanity for far longer than most people realized. What makes this book remarkable is not simply the vast amount of material it contains. Many books contain information. Many books compile historical sources. Many books describe ancient traditions. Yet readers continue returning to this work nearly a century after its publication, because Hall was attempting something far more ambitious than creating a reference volume. He was attempting to uncover relationships, to trace hidden continuities, to reveal how ideas migrate through time, changing their outward appearance while preserving their essential structure. For some readers, the book becomes an introduction to ancient philosophy. For others, it becomes a study of symbolism. For others still, it serves as a doorway into comparative religion, esoteric traditions, psychology, mythology, and cultural history. Its enduring appeal comes from the fact that it refuses to remain confined within any single category. The deeper one travels into its pages, the more difficult it becomes to separate history from philosophy, philosophy from symbolism, symbolism from psychology, and psychology from the larger question of human consciousness itself. That question lies quietly beneath almost every chapter. How do human beings come to understand themselves and the world they inhabit? Ancient cultures offered many answers. Some looked toward mathematics, some toward ritual, some toward myth, some toward contemplation, some toward symbolic systems designed to communicate ideas that ordinary language struggled to express. Although their methods differed, many of these traditions shared a common assumption. Human beings are capable of perceiving more than they ordinarily perceive, not through supernatural intervention, but through disciplined observation, reflection, and inner development. Seen from this perspective, the symbols, stories, and teachings preserved throughout history begin to serve a different purpose. They become maps rather than monuments, guides rather than relics, attempts by earlier generations to preserve insights they believed were too important to lose. Whether one accepts every claim presented in these traditions is ultimately less important than recognizing the extraordinary effort that civilizations invested in preserving them. Entire schools were built around them. Entire philosophical systems emerged from them. entire cultural movements carried their influence forward. The history of humanity is often told through wars, rulers, inventions, and political revolutions. Yet another history runs alongside it, a quieter history, the history of ideas, the history of symbols, the history of humanity's ongoing search for meaning, order, and understanding. It is this second history that the secret teachings of all ages invites us to explore. As we begin that journey, we will not start with a single civilization, a single religion, or a single philosophy. Instead, we will begin with a question. If a body of wisdom truly has survived across centuries, appearing again and again beneath different names and different forms, how has it remained visible while so often going unnoticed? To approach that question, we must first examine a paradox that stands at the heart of this entire work. The possibility that some of humanity's most enduring ideas have never been hidden at all. They have simply been seen without being understood. Chapter 1. The Secret Hidden in Plain Sight. If there is a single idea that serves as the gateway to everything Manly P. Hall explores in the secret teachings of all ages, it is not the existence of lost civilizations, secret societies, or forgotten religions. It is something far simpler. The possibility that humanity's most enduring ideas have never truly disappeared. They remain present all around us, woven into symbols, stories, monuments, traditions, and systems of thought that most people encounter without ever considering where they came from or what they were originally intended to convey. Modern civilization is surrounded by symbols. They appear on government buildings, national flags, religious structures, universities, corporate logos, currency, and countless objects of everyday life. We recognize them instantly, yet rarely pause to ask why they exist, how old they are, or why similar forms continue to emerge across cultures separated by vast distances and centuries of history. A serpent coiled around a staff, a radiant sun, a ladder stretching between worlds, a winged globe, a circle enclosed within a triangle, a tree connecting heaven and earth. To the modern eye, these often appear as decorative images, artistic choices, or remnants of ancient superstition. Yet Hall argues that for the civilizations that created them, symbols were never merely decorative. They were vehicles of meaning. The ancient world communicated differently from the modern one. Today, information is expected to be direct, explicit, and immediately accessible. Knowledge is often measured by how efficiently it can be transmitted from one person to another. Ancient traditions approached the matter from a very different perspective. They believed that certain truths could not be adequately expressed through straightforward explanation alone. Not because those truths were intentionally concealed, but because they concerned realities that exceeded ordinary language. For this reason, many of the great philosophical, religious, and initiatory traditions of antiquity adopted symbolism as their primary language. According to Hall, symbols functioned as a bridge between visible and invisible realities. They allowed complex ideas to be preserved in forms that could survive political upheaval, cultural change, and the passage of time. Languages evolve, kingdoms rise and fall, libraries burn, entire civilizations vanish. Yet a symbol can travel through centuries, carrying its essential meaning intact. This is one of the observations that fascinated Hall throughout his research. Again and again, he encountered recurring patterns. Ancient Egypt possessed sacred symbols associated with creation, death, rebirth, and cosmic order. The mystery traditions of Greece employed symbolic dramas to communicate philosophical teachings. Pythagorean schools expressed spiritual principles through mathematics and geometry. The Hermetic tradition used allegory and symbolic language to describe the relationship between humanity and the cosmos. Medieval alchemists filled their writings with elaborate images that appeared to describe chemical processes while simultaneously pointing toward inner transformation. The details varied, the cultures varied, the historical circumstances varied, yet the underlying method remained remarkably consistent. Knowledge was clothed in symbol. To modern readers, this immediately raises a question. Why? Why not simply explain the teaching directly? Why surround important ideas with myths, allegories, rituals, and symbolic images? Hall believed the answer lies in the distinction between information and understanding. Information can be transferred. Understanding must be developed. A person can memorize a statement without comprehending its significance. one can repeat a doctrine without grasping the reality it attempts to describe. Ancient educators understood this limitation. Their goal was often not to provide answers, but to cultivate perception. The symbol became a tool for that purpose. Unlike a direct statement, a symbol cannot be exhausted by a single interpretation. It invites contemplation. It encourages the observer to participate in the process of discovery. Each encounter reveals another layer of meaning. This approach formed the foundation of many of the mystery schools that Hall discusses throughout the book. These institutions, whether in Egypt, Greece, or elsewhere, did not merely seek to educate the intellect. They sought to transform the individual. The initiate was not expected to passively receive knowledge. The initiate was expected to develop the capacity to perceive it. From this perspective, the great symbols of antiquity begin to appear in a different light. Consider the pyramid. Most people see an extraordinary architectural achievement, an impressive structure built thousands of years ago through methods that continue to inspire debate. Yet Hall argues that ancient thinkers often viewed such monuments as repositories of philosophical principles. Their proportions, geometry, orientation, and symbolism reflected ideas about the nature of existence itself. The structure became more than a building. It became a lesson expressed through stone. The same principle appears throughout the ancient world. A temple was not merely a place of worship. A myth was not merely a story. A ritual was not merely a ceremony. Each could serve as a symbolic representation of deeper realities concerning human nature, consciousness, and humanity's relationship with the cosmos. This distinction is essential because Hall's work is frequently misunderstood. Many assume that the traditions he describes revolve around secrecy in the ordinary sense of the word, yet the book repeatedly suggests something more nuanced. The wisdom traditions of antiquity were often concealed in plain sight rather than hidden away entirely. Their symbols appeared openly. Their monuments stood publicly. Their myths were widely known. What remained difficult was not seeing them. What remained difficult was reading them. The challenge was interpretive rather than physical. A person could stand before a temple and see only stone. Another could stand before the same structure and perceive a symbolic model of the universe. A person could hear a myth and dismiss it as fiction. Another could hear the same story and recognize philosophical insights concealed beneath narrative imagery. The difference lay not in the object being observed, but in the manner of observation. This idea appears repeatedly throughout Hall's examination of ancient traditions. The visible world, he suggests, was understood by many ancient cultures as the outward expression of invisible principles. Physical forms reflected deeper realities. Patterns visible in nature reflected universal laws. Human beings themselves were regarded as symbolic microcosms of a larger cosmic order. Such ideas may seem unfamiliar today, yet they formed the intellectual foundation of numerous philosophical and spiritual systems for thousands of years. And perhaps that is why these symbols continue to endure. Not because every ancient interpretation remains valid, not because every tradition was necessarily correct, but because the questions they attempted to address remain as relevant now as they were then. What is the nature of reality? How should human beings understand themselves? Is there order beneath apparent chaos? Can wisdom be cultivated? Can perception be expanded? Can deeper meaning be discovered within ordinary experience? These questions have accompanied humanity throughout history. The symbols survived because the questions survived. As Hall saw it, the true inheritance of ancient civilization was not merely a collection of artifacts or forgotten doctrines. It was a way of looking at the world, a conviction that beneath appearances lies a deeper level of significance waiting to be perceived. To recover that perspective, however, required more than curiosity. It required training. The ability to recognize symbolic meaning was not considered an accidental talent. It was cultivated through disciplined study, observation, reflection, and initiation. Which brings us naturally to the next stage of our journey. If symbols were the language through which ancient wisdom was preserved, who taught that language? Who trained individuals to interpret these images, myths, and sacred forms? And how did these teachings survive long enough to influence civilization across centuries? To answer those questions, we must enter the remarkable world of the ancient mystery schools, and that is where our story continues. Chapter 2. The Schools That Trained Human Consciousness. If the symbols, myths, and sacred images that appeared throughout the ancient world truly carried layers of meaning beyond their outward forms, then an important question naturally follows. Who preserved this symbolic language, and how was it transmitted across centuries in a world where knowledge could so easily be lost? For Manly P. Hall, the answer lies in a network of institutions that occupied a unique position within many ancient civilizations. Although they differed in form from one culture to another, they shared a common purpose. They sought to preserve wisdom, cultivate character, and guide individuals toward a deeper understanding of themselves and the universe they inhabited. These institutions became known collectively as the mystery schools. To modern readers, the term often evokes images of secrecy and exclusion. Yet Hall repeatedly emphasizes that the true significance of the mysteries was not secrecy itself. Their purpose was educational in the highest sense of the word. They existed because ancient civilizations believed that wisdom differed fundamentally from information. Facts could be communicated through ordinary instruction, but understanding required preparation, discipline, and experience. Certain truths, they believed, could not simply be handed to an individual. They had to be realized. This conviction shaped much of the intellectual and spiritual life of the ancient world. Long before the emergence of universities, before philosophy became a formal academic pursuit, and before religious traditions were organized into the structures familiar today, there were schools dedicated to the study of existence itself. Their students sought answers to questions that remain as compelling now as they were thousands of years ago. What is the nature of reality? What is the purpose of human life? Is there an underlying order beneath the apparent chaos of the world? And if such an order exists, how can it be understood? According to Hall, the mystery schools approached these questions through a combination of symbolism, ritual, philosophy, mathematics, mythology, and disciplined self-examination. Their objective was not merely to expand knowledge, but to transform perception. The student was expected to develop a new way of seeing. Among all the civilizations associated with the mysteries, none occupied a more important place in Hall's work than Egypt. To countless travelers, philosophers, and historians of antiquity, Egypt appeared as a land of extraordinary antiquity and wisdom. Its monuments seemed older than memory itself. Its temples inspired awe. Its priesthood was widely regarded as the guardian of sacred knowledge accumulated across generations. Whether every claim made about Egypt by later writers was historically accurate is less important than the role Egypt played within the imagination of the ancient world. Again and again, those seeking wisdom looked toward the Nile. Hall regarded the temples of Egypt as far more than places of worship. To the ancient Egyptian mind, the temple represented a symbolic image of the universe itself. Every chamber, corridor, statue, proportion, and ceremonial space formed part of an integrated system designed to communicate principles concerning life, death, nature, consciousness, and cosmic order. A person entering such a temple was not merely entering a building. He was entering a carefully constructed symbolic world. The modern distinction between architecture, religion, philosophy, and education would have made little sense within this context. These were not separate domains, but different expressions of a unified vision of reality. The temple taught not only through words, but through space, movement, imagery, and experience. To walk its halls was, in a sense, to participate in a lesson. This educational function becomes especially clear in the great mythological traditions that Hall examines throughout the book. Among them, none was more influential than the story of Isis and Osiris. According to the ancient narrative, Osiris was a wise ruler who brought order and civilization to humanity before being betrayed and slain by the forces of disorder. His body was scattered across the land, and only through the devotion of Isis were the fragments gathered together and restored. Through death and restoration, Osiris became the ruler of a higher realm and a symbol of triumph over destruction. To interpret this story merely as mythology is to miss what Hall regarded as its deeper purpose. For the initiates, Osiris represented far more than an individual deity. He symbolized the divine potential within humanity itself. His dismemberment reflected the fragmented condition of human consciousness, while his restoration symbolized the possibility of reintegration, enlightenment, and spiritual renewal. The story endured because it addressed a universal human experience, the search for wholeness in a world that often appears divided and incomplete. This theme would become one of the recurring foundations of the mystery tradition. Human beings were not regarded as finished creatures. They were viewed as works in progress. The purpose of education, therefore, was not simply to inform the mind, but to assist in the gradual unfolding of human potential. As centuries passed, many of these ideas traveled beyond Egypt and found new forms of expression throughout the Mediterranean world. Among the civilizations that absorbed and transformed this inheritance, Greece occupies a special place. If Egypt preserved wisdom primarily through symbols, monuments, and sacred drama, Greece increasingly explored similar questions through philosophy and rational inquiry. Yet Hall argues that these approaches should not be viewed as opposites. Rather, they represent different expressions of a common search. Ancient traditions frequently describe Greek philosophers journeying to Egypt in pursuit of knowledge. Whether these accounts are entirely historical or partially legendary, they reveal a widespread belief among the Greeks themselves that important wisdom existed beyond their borders and that Egypt was one of its principal sources. This influence can be seen in many of the mystery traditions that flourished throughout the Greek world. Among the most famous were the Eleusinian mysteries, ceremonies that endured for nearly 2,000 years and attracted participants from every level of society. Statesmen, generals, poets, philosophers, and ordinary citizens made pilgrimages to Eleusis, often regarding the experience as one of the most significant events of their lives. The remarkable longevity of these rites fascinated Hall. Civilizations changed, governments rose and fell, religions evolved, yet generation after generation continued to seek initiation into the mysteries. Such endurance suggests that these ceremonies offered something far more profound than entertainment or social status. At the center of the Eleusinian tradition stood the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Like the Egyptian story of Isis and Osiris, it revolved around themes of loss, descent, recovery, and renewal. Persephone's journey into the underworld and her eventual return symbolized the cyclical rhythms of existence and the possibility of regeneration after periods of darkness. For Hall, the enduring power of such myths lay in their ability to communicate philosophical truths through symbolic narratives. They addressed questions that every generation must eventually confront: the meaning of suffering, the inevitability of change, the reality of death, and the possibility of transformation. The same pattern appears within the Orphic mysteries and, in a different form, within the teachings associated with Pythagoras. Modern history often remembers Pythagoras as a mathematician, yet Hall presents him as something much broader. He appears not merely as a scholar, but as an initiate who viewed numbers as expressions of universal principles. Mathematics, in this tradition, was not simply a practical tool. It was a means of understanding the hidden harmonies underlying the structure of existence. To Pythagoras and his followers, numerical relationships revealed something about the nature of reality itself. Harmony in music, proportion in geometry, order in the heavens, and balance within human life were all connected manifestations of a deeper cosmic pattern. Such ideas would influence centuries of philosophy, science, mysticism, and art, becoming one of the many channels through which the mystery tradition continued its journey through history. Yet beneath the diversity of Egyptian rites, Greek ceremonies, philosophical schools, and symbolic teachings, Hall identifies a single unifying principle: initiation. Modern readers often misunderstand the meaning of this word because they associate it primarily with membership or admission into an exclusive organization. In the ancient world, initiation signified something far more profound. It referred to a process through which an individual underwent a transformation of understanding. The purpose of initiation was not to provide access to hidden information unavailable to others. Rather, it sought to cultivate the ability to perceive meanings that had always been present. The symbols remained the same. The myths remained the same. The world itself remained the same. What changed was the individual. Through study, reflection, symbolic experience, and disciplined preparation, the initiate was expected to move beyond a superficial understanding of life and begin perceiving deeper patterns connecting humanity, nature, and the cosmos. This is why so many initiatory traditions employed symbolic representations of death and rebirth. Such imagery did not necessarily refer to physical death. More often, it represented the abandonment of ignorance, illusion, and limited perception. The candidate entered as one person and emerged with a fundamentally altered understanding of reality. For Hall, this was the true purpose of the mystery schools. They were not institutions dedicated to secrecy. They were institutions dedicated to awakening. Their highest goal was neither intellectual achievement nor social advancement, but the development of human consciousness itself. And yet, despite their influence, the teachers of the mysteries rarely claimed to be the original source of the wisdom they preserved. The priests of Egypt, the initiates of Greece, and the guardians of countless traditions often presented themselves not as inventors, but as custodians of an inheritance received from a far more ancient past. That claim raises a fascinating possibility. If these schools were preserving wisdom rather than creating it, then the origins of that wisdom may lie even deeper in history than the civilizations that taught it. And it is precisely that possibility which leads us to one of the most enduring and controversial ideas explored throughout the secret teachings of all ages. The belief that behind the myths, symbols, and sacred traditions of the ancient world stood the memory of a civilization now lost to history, yet remembered in fragments across countless cultures. To explore that possibility, we must turn to the legends themselves. Chapter 3, The Lost Civilization Behind Ancient Myths. By the time we reach the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, a curious pattern has already begun to emerge. The priests, philosophers, and initiates who preserved the ancient teachings rarely described themselves as creators of wisdom. Again and again, they spoke as guardians rather than inventors, as custodians of an inheritance received from a far older source. The traditions they transmitted were believed to possess an antiquity that extended beyond the memory of nations, and, in some cases, beyond the limits of recorded history itself. This recurring claim raises a question that fascinated Manly P. Hall throughout the secret teachings of all ages. If the mystery schools were preserving wisdom rather than creating it, where did that wisdom originate? The answer offered by many ancient traditions is both intriguing and elusive. Across widely separated civilizations, one encounters stories of forgotten ages, vanished kingdoms, lost continents, divine teachers, and golden eras that ended long before the beginning of known history. These accounts differ in detail, language, and symbolism, yet they often share a remarkably similar structure. They speak of a time when humanity possessed knowledge that was later diminished, dispersed, or forgotten. To Hall, this repetition was worthy of serious consideration. He did not approach such traditions as a collector of fantasies, nor did he insist that every legend should be accepted literally. Instead, he observed that myths often preserve fragments of memory in symbolic form. Just as a symbol may conceal a philosophical truth beneath an image, a legend may preserve historical or cultural memories beneath the language of storytelling. For this reason, Hall regarded the persistence of these narratives as significant. Throughout the ancient world, one finds stories describing a primordial age of wisdom. Some traditions speak of a golden age in which humanity lived in closer harmony with natural and spiritual laws. Others describe great catastrophes that destroyed earlier civilizations, leaving only fragments of their knowledge behind. Still others tell of mysterious teachers who arrived unexpectedly, established the foundations of culture, and then disappeared from history. Such stories appear in Egypt, Greece, India, Central America, and countless other regions. Separated by geography and centuries, they nevertheless seem to circle around the same central idea: the memory of something lost. Among all these traditions, none captured Hall's attention more than the story of Atlantis. The name itself has become one of the most recognizable in human history, yet Hall's treatment of Atlantis differs significantly from many modern interpretations. He was less interested in sensational speculation than in understanding why the story occupied such an important place within the philosophical tradition. The earliest and most influential account comes from Plato, whose dialogues Timaeus and Critias describe a powerful island civilization that existed long before the rise of classical Greece. According to the story, Atlantis possessed immense wealth, advanced organization, and considerable influence. It was a society of extraordinary achievement whose power extended across vast regions of the known world. Yet the significance of Atlantis does not lie solely in its greatness. It lies in its downfall. Plato's account describes a civilization that gradually lost its original virtue. Material success increased, but moral discipline declined. Power expanded, but wisdom diminished. As the balance between outward achievement and inner integrity deteriorated, Atlantis moved toward catastrophe. Ultimately, the civilization was destroyed, disappearing beneath the sea and leaving only a memory behind. Whether Atlantis existed exactly as Plato described it has been debated for centuries. Hall does not claim to possess definitive proof, nor does he present the story as a simple historical fact. What interests him is the lesson embedded within the narrative. A civilization may achieve remarkable accomplishments in science, architecture, government, and material prosperity, yet none of these achievements guarantee survival. Without wisdom, power becomes unstable. Without ethical foundations, knowledge can become destructive. Without inner development, external success may contain the seeds of its own collapse. Seen from this perspective, Atlantis functions not merely as a story about the past, but as a meditation on the relationship between knowledge and responsibility. The lesson would have resonated deeply with the mystery schools. Throughout the ancient traditions examined by Hall, true advancement was never measured solely by technical achievement. The development of character, judgment, and self-mastery occupied an equally important position. Knowledge divorced from wisdom was regarded as dangerous precisely because it amplified human strengths and weaknesses simultaneously. For this reason, the fall of Atlantis became more than a historical question. It became a philosophical warning. Yet Atlantis is only one part of a larger pattern that appears throughout ancient mythology. Again and again, civilizations describe the arrival of extraordinary teachers who seem to emerge from the edges of history. In Egypt, there was Thoth, the divine teacher associated with writing, mathematics, astronomy, and sacred wisdom. In the Hermetic tradition, Hermes Trismegistus appears as a transmitter of profound philosophical knowledge concerning the structure of reality and the nature of the human soul. In Greece, Orpheus became associated with sacred teachings concerning life, death, and spiritual transformation. Elsewhere, different cultures preserved their own versions of culture bringers, lawgivers, and wisdom figures who arrived bearing knowledge that elevated humanity beyond its previous condition. What makes these stories remarkable is not their differences, but their similarities. The names change, the symbols change, the cultural settings change, yet the underlying pattern remains. A teacher appears, knowledge is transmitted, civilization advances, the teacher departs, the teachings remain. Hall did not argue that all of these figures were necessarily the same individual, nor did he insist that every legend described a literal historical event. Instead, he observed that the recurrence of such stories suggests the existence of a deeply rooted human belief that civilization itself emerged through the transmission of wisdom. Whether these teachers were historical persons, symbolic representations, or a combination of both, they occupied an essential place within humanity's collective memory. More importantly, they served as reminders that the most valuable inheritance of any civilization is not its wealth, military strength, or political power. It is its understanding. Empires rise and fall, cities are built and abandoned, languages evolve, dynasties disappear, yet ideas possess a remarkable ability to survive. This realization brings us to one of the most important themes in Hall's work: the survival of wisdom. History is often written through the story of civilizations, but civilizations are fragile. Earthquakes destroy cities, wars erase kingdoms, economic systems collapse, entire cultures can vanish within surprisingly short periods of time. If human knowledge depended entirely upon physical institutions, much of it would have disappeared long ago. Yet certain ideas continue to reappear. The same symbols emerge in different ages. The same philosophical principles resurface under new names. The same questions concerning consciousness, morality, existence, and human potential return generation after generation. For Hall, this continuity suggests that wisdom possesses a resilience that exceeds the lifespan of any individual civilization. Atlantis, whether understood as history, allegory, or a combination of both, represents this principle perfectly. The civilization disappears, The teachings remain, the city is lost, the memory survives, the institutions vanish, the symbols endure. And it is through those surviving symbols that ancient wisdom continues its journey across time. This realization brings us to the next stage of our exploration. If civilizations can perish while their teachings survive, how exactly are those teachings preserved? What allows an idea to cross centuries, cultures, religions, and political systems without losing its essential meaning? According to Manly P. Hall, the answer lies in the most universal language ever created. A language older than alphabets, older than nations, and in many ways older than history itself. The language of symbols. Chapter 4. Why symbols rule the human mind. There is something quietly remarkable about the history of human civilization. The languages of ancient Egypt can no longer be spoken as they once were. The philosophical schools of classical Greece have long since disappeared. The priests who served in forgotten temples are gone, and the empires that once commanded continents now survive only in fragments of stone and scattered manuscripts. Yet despite the passing of thousands of years, many of the images those civilizations created remain instantly recognizable. A circle, a serpent, a tree, a winged disc, a radiant sun. These symbols continue to appear in religious traditions, works of art, architecture, literature, national emblems, and even modern institutions, often without anyone asking why these particular images have endured while so much else has vanished. For Manly P. Hall, this was not simply an accident of history. It was evidence that the ancient world had discovered something fundamental about the nature of human understanding. Throughout the secret teachings of all ages, Hall argues that the greatest ideas of antiquity were rarely entrusted to words alone. Words belong to particular languages, and languages inevitably change. They divide cultures, evolve across generations, and eventually disappear altogether. Symbols possess a different kind of permanence. They are capable of surviving the collapse of civilizations because they communicate through relationships, patterns, and images that the human mind continues to recognize long after the original language has been forgotten. For this reason, the mystery schools regarded symbolism not as decoration, but as one of humanity's most sophisticated forms of communication. To the modern observer, a symbol often appears to be little more than an illustration placed beside an idea. The ancient initiates approached the matter from an entirely different direction. They understood the symbol itself to be the teaching. Rather than explaining reality directly, they allowed the student to contemplate an image whose meaning unfolded gradually through study, experience, and reflection. Hall repeatedly emphasizes that symbols possess a quality that ordinary language lacks. A sentence usually points toward one intended meaning. A genuine symbol can reveal many. The same image may instruct a child through imagination, challenge a philosopher through reason, and illuminate an initiate through direct insight. None of these interpretations necessarily excludes the others because symbols do not reduce reality to a single definition. Instead, they invite the observer to participate in the discovery of meaning. This explains why symbolic education occupied such an important place within the ancient mysteries. The goal was never to memorize explanations. It was to cultivate perception. An initiate was expected to learn how to read the visible world in the same way one learns to read a written language. Just as letters combine to form words and words combine to express ideas, symbols formed a universal vocabulary through which the ancient traditions communicated principles concerning nature, consciousness, morality, and the structure of existence itself. Seen from this perspective, the recurring symbols of the ancient world begin to reveal an extraordinary continuity. Consider the sun. From an astronomical standpoint, it is simply the star at the center of our solar system. Yet across Egypt, Greece, Persia, India, and countless other civilizations, the sun consistently became a symbol of illumination, order, intelligence, vitality, and divine consciousness. Hall points out that this association did not arise merely because the sun gives physical light. Rather, it provided an immediately visible analogy for another kind of illumination, the awakening of understanding itself. As sunlight allows the eye to perceive the external world, wisdom enables the mind to perceive truth. The image of the tree communicates another principle that appears throughout ancient philosophy. Its roots descend into unseen depths, while its branches rise toward the heavens, uniting what lies below with what reaches above. For this reason, trees repeatedly appear as symbols of growth, continuity, and the interconnected structure of life. Hall explores this idea extensively through traditions such as the Kabbalistic tree of life, where a seemingly simple image becomes an entire philosophical map describing the relationship between the human soul, the universe, and the divine. Few symbols fascinated Hall more than the serpent. Throughout history, no image has produced more contradictory interpretations. In one culture, the serpent represents danger, while in another it becomes a symbol of healing, wisdom, regeneration, or hidden knowledge. Hall argues that these apparent contradictions arise only when symbols are separated from the principles they were intended to express. The serpent sheds its skin and appears renewed. It moves close to the earth while remaining strangely elusive. It possesses both creative and destructive associations, making it an ideal symbolic language through which ancient teachers explored transformation, latent power, and the continual renewal of life. Such examples demonstrate an important principle. Symbols should never be understood in isolation. They belong to systems of thought. A single image acquires meaning through its relationship with other symbols, myths, rituals, and philosophical ideas. Remove it from that larger context, and much of its significance disappears. Place it back within the symbolic universe from which it emerged, and the image begins to function once again as a vehicle of knowledge rather than a decorative motif. This insight led Hall toward one of the central conclusions of his work. Ancient civilizations did not preserve wisdom by hiding books beneath the earth or locking teachings behind inaccessible doors. They preserved wisdom by clothing it in forms capable of surviving history itself. A temple might be destroyed, yet the geometric principles embodied within its design could reappear elsewhere. A civilization might vanish, yet the symbolic language through which it expressed its philosophy could quietly continue within another culture under different names and different religious traditions. In this sense, symbols became the true archives of civilization. They carried ideas farther than political institutions ever could. They crossed borders more easily than languages. They survived religious reformations, imperial conquests, migrations, and cultural transformations because they addressed something more enduring than any particular historical period. They spoke to recurring structures of human experience. Although Hall wrote decades before the widespread influence of analytical psychology, many of his observations anticipate ideas later explored by Carl Jung concerning universal symbolic patterns. Hall himself does not build his argument upon psychology. He approaches the subject historically and philosophically, yet his conclusion is strikingly similar. Certain images continue to reappear because they correspond to recurring realities within both nature and human consciousness. The mountain becomes a symbol of ascent because every civilization recognizes the effort required to reach higher ground. The circle suggests wholeness because it possesses neither beginning nor end. The journey becomes a symbol of transformation because every human life unfolds through stages of departure, challenge, discovery, and return. These associations are not arbitrary inventions. They arise from repeated human experience. For this reason, symbols possess a remarkable ability to communicate across cultures that share neither language nor history. This also explains why myths occupied such an essential place within the mystery schools. To one listener, a myth remained simply a story. To another, it revealed ethical instruction. To the philosopher, it expressed metaphysical principles. To the initiate, it became a symbolic map describing the evolution of consciousness itself. Nothing within the story had changed, only the depth of perception brought to it by the observer. Here we arrive at one of Hall's most enduring insights. Ancient wisdom was never intended to be exhausted by a single explanation. Each generation was expected to rediscover it for itself, and symbols made that rediscovery possible because they continued revealing new dimensions of meaning as the observer matured intellectually, morally, and spiritually. Perhaps this is why so many of the world's oldest symbols remain strangely compelling even today. They continue to invite interpretation. They continue to provoke reflection. And they continue to remind us that the visible world may contain far more meaning than it first appears to possess. Yet, among all the symbolic languages developed by the ancient world, one occupied a uniquely privileged position. Unlike myths or sacred images, it appeared to reveal not merely the meaning of reality, but its very structure. To the initiates of the Pythagorean tradition, number was more than a tool for measurement. It was the architecture of existence itself. And it is to that remarkable vision of the universe that we now turn, the mathematical blueprint of reality. Chapter 5, the mathematical blueprint of reality. To the modern mind, numbers are instruments of calculation. They measure distance, quantify matter, describe motion, and organize information. They belong to commerce, engineering, science, and technology. Their value lies in precision, and their purpose appears entirely practical. The ancient world approached them very differently. Long before mathematics became a scientific discipline, many philosophers regarded number as something far more profound. It was not merely a method for describing reality after it had been observed. It was woven into reality itself. To understand number was, in some measure, to understand the order by which the universe had been fashioned. Few individuals embodied this vision more completely than Pythagoras. Modern education has largely reduced his name to a single mathematical theorem, yet this familiar association captures only a small part of the man presented in the secret teachings of all ages. Hall portrays Pythagoras not primarily as a mathematician, but as one of the great initiates of antiquity, a philosopher whose search for truth united mathematics, music, ethics, religion, and metaphysics into a single intellectual tradition. According to the accounts Hall examines, Pythagoras devoted many years to study within the great centers of ancient learning. Egypt occupies a particularly important place in these traditions. There, under the guidance of priests who preserved the symbolic sciences of the mystery schools, he encountered methods of thought that viewed the universe as an ordered and intelligible whole rather than a collection of unrelated phenomena. When he eventually returned to the Greek world and established his community at Crotona, he did not found a school devoted simply to mathematics. He founded a disciplined, philosophical order. Those admitted into the Pythagorean Brotherhood accepted a way of life governed by intellectual inquiry, moral discipline, contemplation, and the pursuit of harmony. Study extended beyond geometry and arithmetic into music, astronomy, ethics, and self-mastery because these subjects were understood to illuminate different aspects of the same underlying reality. For Pythagoras, knowledge could not be divided into isolated compartments. Truth possessed unity. It was this conviction that led him toward one of the most influential ideas in the history of philosophy. All things are ordered through number. Hall repeatedly returns to this principle because it distinguishes the Pythagorean tradition from the ordinary practice of mathematics. To say that numbers describe reality is a familiar observation. To say that reality itself is fundamentally numerical is something altogether different. The Pythagoreans believed that every visible form reflected invisible relationships capable of being expressed mathematically. Proportion governed architecture. Rhythm governed music. Cycles governed the heavens. Balance governed nature. Wherever harmony appeared, number stood quietly behind it. The universe was not regarded as accidental. It was regarded as intelligible because it possessed order. This idea transformed the meaning of number itself. To the ordinary observer, the number 1 simply marks the beginning of counting. Within the Pythagorean tradition, unity represented the source from which multiplicity emerges. It symbolized the undivided origin underlying all existence. From unity came duality, not merely as the number 2, but as the principle through which distinction became possible. Light and darkness, motion and rest, inner and outer, subject and object. Difference entered existence. The number 3 suggested reconciliation. Where 2 principles appeared opposed, a third introduced relationship, proportion, and harmony. For this reason, triadic structures appear repeatedly throughout philosophy, religion, and mythology, not as arbitrary inventions, but as symbolic expressions of balance. The number 4 represented stability. Its symbolism could be seen throughout nature and civilization alike, the 4 directions, the traditional 4 elements, the 4 seasons recognized by many ancient cultures, and the square itself, whose balanced proportions made it an enduring symbol of permanence and foundation. Hall emphasizes that such interpretations should never be confused with superstition. The Pythagoreans were not assigning magical powers to numbers. They were observing recurring patterns through which order became visible. Numbers functioned as principles before they became quantities. Perhaps no symbol better expresses this vision than the tetractys. Throughout the secret teachings of all ages, Hall treats the tetractys as one of the central emblems of the Pythagorean school. Arranged as a triangular figure containing 10 points distributed in 4 ascending rows, it represented far more than a mathematical diagram. To the initiates, it embodied the progressive unfolding of creation itself, illustrating how unity gives rise to multiplicity while preserving harmony throughout the process. The reverence shown toward the tetractys has often puzzled modern readers. Why should a simple arrangement of points command such profound respect? Hall suggests that the answer lies not in the diagram itself, but in what it symbolizes. The tetractys presented a vision of reality in which every level of existence emerged according to proportion rather than accident. It reminded the initiate that apparent complexity rests upon underlying simplicity and that diversity can arise without abandoning unity. Geometry extended these principles into visible form. For the Pythagoreans, geometry was not merely the study of shapes. It was number made visible. Lines, circles, triangles, and polygons were understood as manifestations of mathematical relationships that already existed within nature itself. Geometry did not invent order, it revealed it. This conviction explains why geometric forms appear so frequently within the sacred architecture of the ancient world. Whether one examines Egyptian temples, Greek sanctuaries, or many of the symbolic diagrams preserved by later philosophical traditions, proportion occupies a central place. Hall argues that such designs were intended not only to satisfy aesthetic preferences, but to reflect the harmonious structure believed to permeate the cosmos. The circle illustrates this beautifully. Unlike other figures, it possesses no beginning and no end. Every point along its circumference maintains an equal relationship to the center. Such characteristics made it an ideal symbol of unity, eternity, and perfection. The triangle introduced another principle. 3 points establish stability where 2 alone cannot. The simplest enclosed geometric figure became, in many traditions, a symbol of manifestation itself, the emergence of form from underlying unity. Even the square carried philosophical significance. Its equal sides and balanced proportions expressed order brought into the material world. Stability, permanence, and structure found visual expression through geometry long before they became subjects of abstract philosophical discussion. To Hall, these were not arbitrary associations imposed upon mathematics. They reflected an ancient conviction that visible forms mirror invisible principles. Yet perhaps the most beautiful expression of Pythagorean philosophy appears not in geometry, but in music. According to a tradition Hall recounts with particular admiration, Pythagoras observed that harmonious musical intervals corresponded to simple numerical ratios. The pleasing relationship between tones was not accidental, it arose from proportion. This discovery carried implications far beyond music itself. If harmony could emerge from number and sound, might the same principle govern the heavens? From this question developed one of antiquity's most enduring philosophical images, the music of the spheres. The phrase has often been misunderstood. The Pythagoreans did not imagine the planets literally producing melodies audible to the human ear. Rather, they believed that the universe itself operates according to harmonious mathematical relationships, just as a well-tuned instrument produces harmony through proper proportion. The stars move according to order. The seasons return according to order. Life develops according to order. Nature does not unfold through chaos alone. It reveals pattern. This conviction profoundly shaped the philosophical traditions that followed. Hall repeatedly notes that the influence of Pythagorean thought extended far beyond mathematics. Plato absorbed many of its principles. Neoplatonic philosophers expanded them. Hermetic writers expressed similar ideas through symbolic language. Architects, musicians, mystics, and natural philosophers continued to explore the relationship between proportion, harmony, and existence for centuries afterward. What united these diverse traditions was a shared belief that the universe is fundamentally meaningful because it possesses structure. To study number, therefore, was not merely to calculate. It was to contemplate the architecture of reality itself. Seen in this light, mathematics became something approaching a sacred discipline. Not because numbers possessed supernatural power, but because they revealed the rational order through which creation continually expresses itself. And once the ancient philosophers had recognized that order, another question naturally emerged. If the universe is governed by universal principles that can be discovered through observation, proportion, and disciplined thought, who first articulated those principles into a complete philosophy of existence? For generations of initiates, the answer led to a single legendary name, Hermes Trismegistus. And with him begins the next stage of our journey, the wisdom of Hermes. Chapter 6, the wisdom of Hermes. As the ancient philosophers searched for order within nature, many eventually arrived at a remarkable conclusion. The harmony revealed through number, geometry, and the movements of the heavens did not appear to be the product of chance. It suggested the presence of universal principles, laws that seemed to govern every level of existence, from the motions of the stars to the growth of living things, and even the development of human consciousness itself. This conviction gradually gave rise to one of the most enduring figures in the entire history of Western esoteric thought. Not a king, not a conqueror, not the founder of an empire, but a teacher. A name that would echo across Egypt, Greece, the Islamic world, the Renaissance, and eventually into modern philosophy. Hermes Trismegistus. Few figures occupy such a curious position in intellectual history. Unlike Plato or Aristotle, whose lives can be examined through historical records, Hermes exists at the boundary where history, philosophy, religion, and legend begin to merge. Ancient writers disagreed about whether he had been an actual historical individual, a succession of enlightened teachers, or a symbolic figure representing the accumulated wisdom of many generations. Hall does not attempt to settle this question. For him, the historical identity of Hermes is ultimately less important than the extraordinary influence associated with his name. Across centuries, Hermes came to represent the ideal of the divine philosopher, the individual who understood the hidden relationship between humanity, nature, and the cosmos, and who sought to express that understanding in a form capable of guiding future generations. Hall observes that the very name Hermes Trismegistus, often translated as Hermes the Thrice Great, reflects this unique position. It symbolizes mastery rather than ordinary scholarship, suggesting a wisdom that embraces multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. Within the traditions examined throughout the secret teachings of all ages, Hermes gradually became associated with the Egyptian god Thoth, the divine patron of writing, mathematics, astronomy, measurement, and sacred knowledge. When Greek civilization encountered the intellectual and religious traditions of Egypt, these two figures became increasingly identified with one another. Whether this identification reflects historical events or symbolic synthesis is less important than what it reveals. The ancient world increasingly viewed wisdom as something universal. Different civilizations preserved it under different names. Its essential principles remained the same. This conviction lies at the heart of the Hermetic tradition. Hall presents Hermeticism not as a religion competing with other religions, nor as a secret society possessing exclusive authority, but as a philosophical tradition devoted to discovering the universal principles that govern existence itself. It seeks unity where ordinary perception sees separation, and coherence where human experience often appears fragmented. For the Hermetic philosopher, the universe is not a collection of disconnected events. It is an ordered whole. Every part participates in a larger pattern. Every level reflects another. Every visible form points toward an invisible principle. This way of thinking appears repeatedly throughout the writings traditionally attributed to Hermes, particularly those collected in the Corpus Hermeticum. These texts do not read like systematic scientific treatises. Instead, they take the form of dialogues in which questions concerning creation, consciousness, destiny, knowledge, and the divine unfold gradually through contemplation rather than argument. Hall regarded these writings as among the most influential philosophical texts inherited from antiquity because they attempted something remarkably ambitious. They sought to reconcile the human mind with the structure of the universe. Rather than treating humanity as isolated from nature, the Hermetic writings consistently present the human being as an integral part of the same living order that governs the stars, the seasons, and the rhythms of creation itself. This vision finds one of its clearest expressions in an idea that has become inseparable from the Hermetic tradition. As above, so below. Although frequently quoted, the phrase is often understood too narrowly. Hall does not present it as a mystical slogan or an invitation to speculative imagination. He treats it as a philosophical principle expressing the correspondence between different levels of reality. The movements observed within nature are not isolated from the principles governing human life. Patterns visible in the heavens find their reflections within the structure of the individual. Order appears consistently because reality itself possesses coherence. The Hermetic philosopher therefore studies the world not simply to accumulate facts, but to recognize relationships. The changing seasons become more than meteorological events. They reveal cycles. The growth of a tree becomes more than biological development. It illustrates unfolding. The continual alternation between activity and rest, expansion and contraction, birth and decline becomes evidence that the same principles repeat themselves throughout existence under different forms. This habit of perceiving correspondence explains why Hermetic philosophy exercised such profound influence upon later traditions. For Hall, it provided a bridge connecting subjects that modern education often separates from one another: astronomy and philosophy, religion and mathematics, ethics and cosmology, human psychology and the natural world. These were not independent fields. They represented different expressions of one underlying reality. This perspective also shaped the Hermetic understanding of mind. Modern readers sometimes encounter Hermetic philosophy through simplified statements, claiming that reality is created merely by thought or that external events are produced directly through individual belief. Hall does not present the tradition in this manner. His interpretation remains considerably more philosophical. The Hermetic writings describe a universe permeated by intelligence, one in which reason, order, and consciousness are woven into the fabric of creation itself. Human beings possess the remarkable capacity to understand the universe precisely because they participate in that same rational order. Knowledge therefore becomes an act of recognition. To understand nature is simultaneously to understand something about oneself. To understand oneself is to discover principles already operating throughout nature. This reciprocal relationship between humanity and the cosmos forms one of the defining characteristics of Hermetic thought. It is also one of the reasons Hall regarded Hermes as such an important figure within the history of philosophy. Hermes did not merely preserve isolated teachings. He offered a framework capable of bringing many traditions together: the symbolic language of Egypt, the mathematical harmony explored by Pythagoras, the philosophical inquiries of Greece, the cosmological reflections that later appeared within Neoplatonism. Each became more intelligible when viewed as different expressions of the same universal search for order. This search inevitably led to another conclusion. If the universe operates according to enduring principles rather than random events, then genuine wisdom cannot consist merely of collecting information. Wisdom requires bringing one's own life into harmony with those principles. For Hall, this marks the true purpose of philosophy. It is not speculation detached from experience. It is alignment. The more deeply one understands the structure of reality, the more responsibly one is expected to live within it. Knowledge carries ethical consequences because understanding the order of the universe also reveals humanity's place within that order. This is why the Hermetic tradition exerted such lasting influence upon later schools of thought. Its principles echoed through medieval philosophy, Renaissance scholarship, sacred symbolism, mystical theology, and countless esoteric traditions that sought to reconcile science, religion, and philosophy rather than separate them. Yet, among all the disciplines shaped by Hermetic thought, one stands apart for the extraordinary richness of its symbolism. For centuries, many assumed it concerned nothing more than furnaces, metals, and the impossible dream of turning lead into gold. Hall invites us to look much deeper, for the true work of the alchemist was never confined to the laboratory. Its primary field of transformation was the human being. And it is to that profound symbolic science that we now turn. The Alchemy of Transformation. Chapter 7. The Alchemy of Transformation. Few traditions have been more misunderstood than alchemy. For centuries, the popular imagination has portrayed the alchemist as an eccentric figure standing alone before a glowing furnace, surrounded by strange symbols, glass vessels, mysterious powders, and impossible ambitions. He is remembered as someone who devoted an entire lifetime to the futile dream of manufacturing gold from common metals, a dream that history supposedly proved impossible. Manly P. Hall begins from a very different place. He does not deny that many alchemists experimented with minerals, metals, furnaces, and chemical processes. Nor does he dismiss the historical development of laboratory science that eventually emerged from these investigations. Instead, he asks a far more interesting question. Why did so many of history's most educated philosophers, physicians, mathematicians, and mystics devote themselves to alchemy? If the discipline consisted only of failed chemistry, why did it continue attracting some of the finest minds of Europe and the Islamic world for well over 1,000 years? Hall believed the answer becomes clear only when one learns to read alchemical writings in the same symbolic language that shaped the mystery schools. The laboratory was real. The furnace was real. The metals were real. Yet behind every visible operation stood another process unfolding at a different level. Alchemy, in its highest form, was never concerned solely with changing the nature of metals. It was concerned with understanding the nature of transformation itself. This distinction explains why so many alchemical manuscripts appear almost impossible to understand when read literally. Their pages are filled with kings and queens, dragons and lions, suns and moons, marriages and deaths, strange creatures consuming one another, mysterious vessels sealed against the outside world, and fires that purify rather than destroy. To the casual reader, these illustrations resemble elaborate fantasies. Hall argues that they were intended to function as a symbolic language, much like the myths of Egypt or the geometry of the Pythagoreans. The alchemist spoke through images because the work being described extended beyond ordinary chemistry. It concerned the gradual perfection of nature. Throughout the secret teachings of all ages, Hall repeatedly returns to a principle inherited from the Hermetic tradition. Nature is not static. Everything within creation moves through processes of growth, refinement, decay, renewal, and transformation. Seeds become trees. Caterpillars become butterflies. Raw stone becomes polished marble. The child gradually becomes the adult. Transformation is not an exception within nature. It is one of nature's most universal laws. The alchemist believed that this same principle operated within the human being. If metals could be purified through successive operations, perhaps the human character could also pass through stages of refinement. If nature continually moves toward greater order and complexity, perhaps human consciousness is likewise capable of development. Hall is careful not to reduce this idea to simple moral improvement. The work of the alchemist was not merely becoming kinder, wiser, or more disciplined, although those qualities certainly mattered. The transformation sought by the ancient philosophers reached deeper than conduct alone. It concerned the gradual realization of humanity's highest possibilities. For this reason, the laboratory itself acquired symbolic importance. The furnace represented more than a source of heat. It became an image of the conditions under which transformation becomes possible. Nothing changes without passing through fire. Metal is purified through fire. Clay hardens through fire. Glass takes shape through fire. The alchemist recognized this recurring pattern within nature and employed it as a symbol of another kind of purification. Difficult experiences, discipline, self-examination, patience. These too expose what is weak while strengthening what is enduring. Hall never suggests that life's trials are valuable simply because they are painful. Rather, he observes that every authentic tradition of initiation acknowledges the necessity of testing. The furnace therefore becomes less a place of destruction than a place where impurities are gradually separated from what possesses lasting value. The same symbolic approach appears in the substances most frequently mentioned within alchemical literature. Mercury, sulfur, salt. Read literally, they belong to chemistry. Read symbolically, they represent fundamental principles operating throughout nature and within the human being. Hall spends considerable time explaining that these substances should not be interpreted as ordinary materials alone. They function as philosophical symbols describing different aspects of existence that must ultimately be brought into proper relationship. This symbolic method explains why alchemical texts often appear deliberately obscure. Their authors were not attempting to frustrate sincere students. They were attempting to prevent symbolic language from being mistaken for ordinary technical instruction. Without an understanding of symbolism, the entire tradition becomes almost impossible to interpret correctly. Among all alchemical symbols, none achieved greater fame than the philosopher's stone. Generations searched for it. Legends surrounded it. Stories attributed miraculous powers to it, claiming that it could transform base metals into gold, heal disease, prolong life, and reveal extraordinary knowledge. Hall approaches these traditions with characteristic balance. He does not simply dismiss them as fantasy. Neither does he insist that they should be accepted literally. Instead, he asks what the stone represented within the symbolic language of the mysteries. If alchemy concerns transformation, then the stone naturally becomes the symbol of perfected transformation. Not an object separated from the alchemist, the completion of the alchemist's work. Throughout the book, Hall repeatedly suggests that the greatest achievement sought by the philosophical alchemist was not the accumulation of wealth, but the perfection of understanding. Gold occupied a privileged place because, among the metals known to the ancient world, it appeared remarkably resistant to corruption. It neither rusted nor decayed with ease. Its permanence made it an ideal symbol of completion, incorruptibility, and enduring value. Lead, by contrast, represented something unfinished, not evil, not worthless, simply incomplete. Within the symbolic imagination of alchemy, the journey from lead to gold expressed the possibility that what begins in an undeveloped state may gradually realize its highest nature through proper refinement. Hall is careful not to reduce these images to simplistic psychological formulas. Lead does not merely stand for one human weakness, nor does gold represent one particular virtue. Their meaning remains intentionally expansive because genuine transformation cannot be confined to a single definition. Like every authentic symbol, they continue revealing new dimensions as understanding deepens. This gradual unfolding explains why alchemy fascinated philosophers for centuries. Its language allowed discussions of ethics, metaphysics, religion, cosmology, and human development to occur simultaneously within the same symbolic framework. One image could speak of laboratory work. The same image could describe spiritual discipline. Neither interpretation necessarily canceled the other. Both could exist together. Hall regarded this multi-layered symbolism as one of alchemy's greatest achievements. The tradition succeeded because it refused to separate the visible world from the invisible principles operating within it. Matter reflected spirit. Nature reflected consciousness. The outer work reflected the inner work. Each illuminated the other. Among the many symbols Hall explores, one appears with particular beauty. The phoenix, consumed by fire, only to rise renewed from its own ashes, the phoenix became one of the clearest expressions of the alchemical process. Its significance lay not in miraculous resurrection, but in the recognition that genuine renewal often requires the ending of an earlier condition. Something incomplete must pass away before something more complete can emerge. This idea echoes throughout every tradition we have encountered so far. The initiations of Egypt, the mysteries of Eleusis, the philosophy of Pythagoras, the writings attributed to Hermes. Again and again, transformation appears not as an accidental event, but as the very rhythm through which wisdom develops. Seen in this broader context, alchemy no longer appears as an isolated medieval curiosity. It becomes another chapter in humanity's long effort to understand how change occurs. Not only in metals, not only in nature, but within consciousness itself. For Hall, this is why alchemy deserves to stand alongside the greatest philosophical traditions of antiquity. It asks a question that remains permanently relevant. Can human nature be refined? Can understanding mature? Can the fragmented become whole? The answer offered by the alchemists was never achieved through a single discovery or a miraculous formula. It emerged through a lifelong process of purification, discipline, contemplation, and gradual participation in the same laws of transformation already visible throughout the natural world. And once the alchemists had asked how the human being might be transformed, another question inevitably followed. If such transformation truly follows an intelligible path, can that path itself be represented? Can the journey of consciousness be mapped? For centuries, two symbolic traditions claimed that it could, one through a living tree, the other through a mysterious sequence of images carried in a simple deck of cards. It is to those remarkable symbolic maps that we now turn. The Map of the Soul, Chapter 8, The Secret Doctrine of Qabbalah. Among all the traditions examined throughout the secret teachings of all ages, few have inspired as much fascination and as much misunderstanding as the Qabbalah. To many modern readers, it appears to be an obscure branch of Jewish mysticism, filled with unfamiliar Hebrew words, complex diagrams, and mysterious numerical calculations. Others approach it as a collection of esoteric practices reserved for a select few. Yet neither description captures the role that Qabbalah occupies in Manly P. Hall's work. Hall presents it as something far more ambitious, not simply as a religious doctrine, not merely as a mystical philosophy, but as one of humanity's most comprehensive symbolic attempts to explain how the visible universe emerges from an invisible source. After following the symbolic language of Egypt, the mathematical philosophy of Pythagoras, and the universal principles of Hermes, we arrive at a tradition that seeks to unite all of these currents into a single map of creation itself. For Hall, the Qabbalah does not begin with the world. It begins before the world. This is perhaps the most striking feature of Kabbalistic philosophy. Most systems of thought begin by asking how the universe functions. The Qabbalah asks a more difficult question. How does anything come into existence at all? Long before stars illuminated the heavens, before time could be measured, before matter possessed form, and before consciousness became aware of itself, what existed? Hall explains that the ancient Kabbalists answered this question with extraordinary caution. Rather than attempting to define the absolute, they deliberately refused to describe it. Anything that can be fully described already possesses limits. The absolute, by definition, cannot. For this reason, the earliest stage of existence is represented by a word that almost appears to deny existence altogether, en. The Hebrew word is often translated as no thing or nothing, yet Hall carefully points out that such translations can be misleading. En does not suggest emptiness in the ordinary sense, nor does it imply absence or non-existence. Instead, it refers to that which lies beyond every category through which the human mind normally understands reality. It is not a void waiting to be filled. It is the infinite beyond thought itself. From Ein emerges another principle, Ein Sof, the boundless. Here the Qabbalah begins to suggest infinity, not as endless physical space, but as limitless being. If Ein represents the unknowable essence beyond all definition, Ein Sof expresses the limitless potential inherent within that essence. Yet even infinity remains beyond manifestation. Nothing has yet appeared. No worlds, no stars, no forms, no individual consciousness. Hall lingers over this distinction because it reveals something essential about Kabbalistic thought. Creation is not imagined as an event that occurred outside the divine. Rather, creation unfolds as a gradual revelation of principles already contained within the infinite itself. The third stage carries this movement one step further, Ein Sof Or, the limitless light. Here, Hall invites the reader to understand light symbolically rather than physically. This is not the light emitted by the sun, nor is it the illumination produced by fire. It is the first expression of intelligibility, the possibility that the hidden source of existence may begin to reveal itself. Throughout the world's wisdom traditions, light repeatedly becomes the symbol of consciousness because both perform the same essential function. They make perception possible. Only after these three transcendent principles does creation, in the Kabbalistic sense, truly begin. Hall emphasizes that the universe is not described as having been manufactured like a craftsman assembling separate materials. Instead, existence unfolds through what the Kabbalists called emanation. This distinction is fundamental. An object created from outside remains separate from its creator. An emanation remains connected to its source. Hall repeatedly returns to this idea because it transforms the entire relationship between humanity and the cosmos. If creation is an emanation rather than an external construction, then every level of existence continues to participate in the reality from which it emerged. Nothing is completely isolated. Everything remains connected. It is here that Hall introduces one of the central ideas running throughout the secret teachings of all ages. Ancient wisdom consistently rejected the notion of a fragmented universe. Whether one studies Egypt, Pythagorean philosophy, Hermeticism, or the Qabbalah, the same conviction appears again and again. Reality forms an ordered continuum. The visible emerges from the invisible. The finite expresses the infinite. The many arise from the one. Different traditions employ different symbols, yet they point toward remarkably similar principles. The Qabbalah gives this unfolding process its most elaborate symbolic expression. Hall explains that the infinite cannot be approached directly by the ordinary human intellect. For this reason, the Kabbalists employed symbols, not because symbols replaced truth, but because they offered the closest approximation available to the human imagination. Every symbol serves as a bridge. Every diagram becomes a philosophical language. Every Hebrew letter carries significance extending beyond ordinary speech. This explains why Hall devotes considerable attention to the Hebrew alphabet. To modern readers, letters exist primarily to record sounds. Within the Kabbalistic tradition, letters were understood differently. Each represented a creative principle. Each possessed numerical significance. Each participated in the architecture of the universe. Language itself became sacred because speech symbolized manifestation. Just as thought becomes audible through words, the invisible becomes visible through creation. The Hebrew alphabet therefore functioned not merely as a writing system, but as a symbolic reflection of cosmic processes. This conviction also explains why numbers occupy such an important place within the Qabbalah. The numerical symbolism explored by Pythagoras does not disappear here. Instead, it becomes integrated into a broader metaphysical vision. Letters become numbers. Numbers become principles. Principles become stages within the unfolding of existence. Nothing stands alone. Everything participates in a larger symbolic order. Hall regarded this remarkable integration as one of the greatest achievements of Kabbalistic philosophy. It refused to isolate theology from mathematics, language from cosmology, or symbolism from metaphysics. Every discipline illuminated the others. Each became another path toward understanding the same underlying reality. Seen from this perspective, the Qabbalah is far more than a collection of mystical speculations. It is an attempt to answer one of humanity's oldest questions. How does the infinite become the finite without ceasing to be infinite? How does unity become diversity without losing its unity? How does the unseen become visible while remaining forever beyond complete comprehension? Hall never suggests that these questions can be answered through simple definitions. Instead, he presents the Qabbalah as a symbolic discipline designed to train the mind to think beyond ordinary categories. Its purpose is not merely to explain creation. Its purpose is to expand the observer's capacity to contemplate it. And that journey is only beginning. For once the Kabbalists described the origin of creation, they sought to map the structure through which that creative process continually unfolds. They represented it not with a diagram of the physical universe, but with the image of a living tree, a symbolic pattern that would become one of the most influential diagrams in the entire history of Western mysticism. It is to that extraordinary symbol that we now turn, the Tree of the Sephiroth. Chapter 9. The Brotherhood of Hidden Knowledge. As the symbolic world of the Qabbalah unfolds, another question naturally arises. If these philosophical systems preserved such elaborate bodies of knowledge, how did they survive the collapse of kingdoms, the destruction of libraries, and the transformation of entire civilizations? History offers few guarantees for the survival of ideas. Empires disappear, religions divide, languages evolve beyond recognition. Even the greatest centers of learning have, at various moments, been consumed by war, neglect, or time itself. Yet many of the symbolic traditions explored throughout the secret teachings of all ages continued to reappear, often centuries after the institutions that first cultivated them had vanished. For Manly P. Hall, this continuity cannot be understood without examining the role played by what he calls the initiatory fraternities, the brotherhoods that regarded themselves not as creators of wisdom, but as its custodians. It is here that the reader encounters some of the most discussed and most misunderstood organizations in the history of Western esotericism: the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and the numerous philosophical fraternities that have been described, sometimes accurately, and sometimes imaginatively, as secret societies. Modern culture has surrounded these names with speculation. Popular novels portray them as hidden governments manipulating world events from the shadows. Conspiracy theories transform them into invisible powers directing the course of history. Hall's treatment is remarkably different. Although he acknowledges that secrecy formed part of their traditions, he argues that their true significance lies elsewhere. The central question is not what they supposedly controlled, it is what they attempted to preserve. Throughout the book, Hall repeatedly returns to a pattern already familiar from the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece. Knowledge, in the ancient world, was rarely regarded as a possession. It was considered a responsibility. To receive wisdom meant assuming the obligation to protect it from distortion, misuse, and gradual corruption. The purpose of initiation, therefore, was not simply to admit new members into an organization. It was to ensure that those entrusted with symbolic teachings possessed the patience, discipline, and moral character required to understand them properly. This principle helps explain why so many philosophical fraternities adopted symbols instead of lengthy doctrinal statements. A symbol could be recognized by those who understood its language while remaining almost invisible to those who did not. The symbol concealed nothing. It simply revealed different depths according to the perception of the observer. Hall believed this educational method linked medieval fraternities with far older traditions. Although separated by centuries, they inherited a common conviction that truth should not merely be repeated, but realized. Among the organizations that attracted Hall's attention, few possess a more mysterious history than the Rosicrucians. The Rosicrucian movement entered European consciousness during the early 17th century through a series of remarkable manifestos, including the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio Fraternitatis. These writings described an elusive brotherhood founded by the legendary Christian Rosenkreuz, a figure said to have traveled through the great centers of learning in the East before returning to Europe with a renewed vision of philosophy, science, and religion. Whether Christian Rosenkreuz was an historical individual or a symbolic founder remains one of the enduring questions surrounding the Rosicrucian tradition. Hall approaches the subject with characteristic restraint. Rather than attempting to prove the literal existence of the Brotherhood, he focuses on the ideals expressed by the Rosicrucian literature itself. Those writings called for a reformation, not merely of religious institutions, but of human understanding. They envisioned a philosophy in which science, morality, religion, and symbolic wisdom would once again be reconciled, rather than treated as competing fields of knowledge. This aspiration deeply impressed Hall because it echoed themes already encountered throughout the ancient mysteries. Knowledge was not fragmented. Truth possessed unity. The Rosicrucians, whether viewed as an organized fraternity or as the literary expression of a philosophical movement, sought to recover that unity. Another fraternity occupies an even larger place within the secret teachings of all ages: Freemasonry. Few organizations have generated more speculation than the Masonic Order, and Hall devotes considerable attention to separating its symbolic foundations from the myths that have accumulated around it. He does not present Freemasonry primarily as a political institution or a secret government. Instead, he interprets it as a symbolic school whose ceremonies preserve fragments of much older initiatory traditions. Its tools are the tools of the builder: the square, the compass, the level, the plumb, the rough ashlar, the perfect ashlar. To an ordinary craftsman, these are practical instruments used in construction. Within Masonic symbolism, however, they become philosophical emblems describing the construction of human character. The unfinished stone represents potential rather than failure. The carefully shaped stone represents refinement achieved through discipline, knowledge, and ethical development. Once again, Hall invites the reader to look beyond appearances. The symbols point inward before they point outward. This symbolic approach reflects a broader conviction shared by many initiatory traditions. The true temple is not merely an architectural structure. It is the human being. Its foundations are laid through discipline. Its proportions are established through wisdom. Its completion depends upon the gradual perfection of the individual rather than the raising of walls from stone. Hall repeatedly emphasizes that many Masonic ceremonies derive much of their significance from symbolism inherited from earlier civilizations. Egyptian imagery, Hebrew tradition, Pythagorean philosophy, Hermetic thought, biblical allegory. Rather than existing in isolation, these streams converge within a symbolic language designed to remind the initiate that humanity belongs to a much older philosophical inheritance. This does not mean that every historical claim made by later Masonic writers should be accepted uncritically. Hall is careful to distinguish documented history from symbolic tradition. He recognizes that many legends surrounding ancient lineages cannot be verified with certainty. Yet he also argues that myths often preserve philosophical truths even when their historical details remain uncertain. For that reason, the value of an initiatory tradition cannot be measured solely by the literal accuracy of every legend attached to it. Its deeper value lies in the ideas it seeks to preserve. This distinction also helps explain the meaning of secrecy within these brotherhoods. Modern readers frequently assume that secrecy exists to conceal power. Hall proposes another possibility. The greatest danger facing symbolic wisdom is not that it will be discovered. It is that it will be misunderstood. A mathematical formula loses little when explained to a beginner. A profound symbol may lose almost everything if interpreted too quickly or too literally. The discipline of initiation therefore served not to create exclusivity for its own sake, but to encourage gradual understanding. Each stage prepared the student for the next. Each symbol acquired greater depth as perception matured. The process itself became part of the teaching. Seen from this perspective, the brotherhoods described throughout the secret teachings of all ages form less a chain of secret organizations than a continuous tradition of symbolic education. Their outward forms changed with history. Their names differed from country to country. Some disappeared entirely, while others emerged centuries later. Yet beneath these changes, Hall perceived a remarkable continuity, the same reverence for wisdom, the same respect for symbols, the same belief that knowledge carries ethical responsibility, and the same conviction that the highest purpose of education is not merely to produce informed individuals, but transformed human beings. This, perhaps more than any particular ritual or institution, constitutes the true brotherhood. Not membership in a hidden society, but participation in an unbroken search for wisdom that stretches across civilizations, linking Egypt to Greece, Greece to Hermetic philosophy, Hermeticism to the Qabbalah, and the initiatory traditions of the ancient world to the philosophical fraternities of later centuries. The names changed, the symbols evolved, the languages differed, yet the work remained remarkably consistent. To preserve the enduring principles that help humanity understand both the universe and itself. And having followed that tradition through its symbols, its philosophies, its mathematics, its myths, and its brotherhoods, we arrive at the final question that stands behind the entire journey. What, ultimately, were all of these traditions trying to teach? What single vision of human life connects the mystery schools, Pythagoras, Hermes, the Qabbalah, Alchemy, and the great initiatory fraternities into one continuous stream of wisdom? It is to that enduring question that we now turn in our concluding chapter, The Secret Teaching of All Ages. Chapter 10. The Secret Teaching of All Ages. After nearly 700 pages devoted to the religions of antiquity, the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, the philosophy of Pythagoras, the Hermetic writings, alchemy, the Qabbalah, sacred geometry, symbolic traditions, and the initiatory fraternities of later centuries, it becomes increasingly difficult to avoid a simple question. What ultimately was Manly P, Hall attempting to communicate through this extraordinary collection of material? At first glance, the book appears to wander through an astonishing variety of subjects. One chapter explores forgotten civilizations. Another examines ancient symbols. Others move through mythology, mathematics, architecture, mysticism, philosophy, secret orders, and religious traditions separated by thousands of years and vast geographical distances. Read casually, the work can seem almost encyclopedic, a magnificent archive of humanity's most mysterious ideas. Yet, the deeper one follows Hall's argument, the more apparent it becomes that these subjects were never intended to stand alone. They are pieces of a single pattern. This realization changes the entire character of the book. The Secret Teachings of All Ages is not primarily about Atlantis. the tarot, alchemy, Freemasonry, or even the mystery schools themselves. Those traditions occupy its pages because Hall believed each had preserved fragments of something larger than itself, something that repeatedly surfaced throughout history under different names, different symbols, and different cultural forms, while remaining remarkably consistent in its essential purpose. Throughout the centuries, civilizations have explained reality in different languages. Egypt spoke through monumental architecture and sacred imagery. Greece increasingly expressed similar insights through philosophy and rational inquiry. The Hebrew sages contemplated creation through the symbolic structure of the Qabbalah. Hermetic thinkers described the universe through universal principles, while the alchemists translated those same principles into the language of transformation. The outward expressions often appear unrelated, yet Hall continually invites the reader to look beneath their surface differences, where another kind of continuity begins to emerge. It is not the continuity of institutions. Empires disappear, religions divide, libraries burn, languages evolve until they become almost unrecognizable. History leaves very little untouched. What survives is something less visible but far more enduring. Ideas survive, symbols survive, questions survive, and perhaps most remarkably of all, certain ways of understanding the relationship between humanity and the universe continue to reappear, even when the civilizations that first articulated them have long since vanished. This continuity lies at the very heart of Hall's work. He was never attempting to persuade his readers that every legend should be accepted literally, or that every tradition preserved perfect historical accuracy. He understood that myths evolve, symbols acquire new meanings, and philosophical systems develop over time. His interest lay elsewhere. He wished to understand why independent civilizations, often separated by immense distances and possessing no obvious historical connection, repeatedly returned to remarkably similar principles concerning order, harmony, consciousness, moral development, and the place of the human being within the cosmos. To Hall, this repetition deserved serious attention. Coincidences occur, but when the same symbolic patterns, the same philosophical structures, and the same spiritual aspirations appear generation after generation across the ancient world, they begin to suggest the existence of a much deeper intellectual inheritance. This is what Hall believed the mystery schools had attempted to preserve. Not a collection of secret facts, not hidden political influence, not supernatural powers reserved for a privileged few. What they preserved was a way of approaching reality itself. They taught that the universe is intelligible because it possesses order, that the visible world reflects principles extending beyond immediate appearance, and that human beings possess the capacity to recognize those principles through disciplined study, ethical development, and the gradual refinement of perception. For this reason, symbols occupy such a central place throughout the book. Hall never treats them as decorative ornaments attached to philosophy. They are philosophy. The symbol accomplishes something ordinary language rarely can. It allows a single image to communicate with different levels of understanding at the same time, revealing one meaning to the beginner, another to the philosopher, and still another to the initiate who has spent years contemplating its significance. In this sense, symbols become living vessels of knowledge, capable of surviving political upheaval and cultural transformation because they speak directly to enduring structures of human experience rather than to the vocabulary of any single age. The same principle explains Hall's fascination with mathematics, geometry, and proportion. Pythagoras did not regard numbers as sacred because they possessed magical qualities. They were sacred because they revealed an underlying harmony already present within nature. Geometry did not impose order upon the universe. It disclosed an order that had always existed. The Hermetic philosophers reached a similar conclusion through different language, arguing that the same principles governing the heavens could also be discovered within the individual, while the alchemists transformed that insight into a symbolic account of inner refinement. The Kabbalists described the unfolding of existence through emanation, and the initiatory fraternities of later centuries preserved many of these ideas within ceremonies, allegories, and architectural symbolism. Each tradition approached the same mountain from a different path. Hall never asks us to mistake the path for the summit. Perhaps this explains why his work continues to attract readers nearly a century after its publication. The questions explored throughout these pages belong to no particular civilization because they arise from the human condition itself. Every generation seeks to understand where consciousness comes from, whether life possesses meaning, whether order exists beneath apparent chaos, and whether the individual is capable of genuine transformation. Scientific knowledge has expanded beyond anything the ancient world could have imagined, yet these deeper questions remain remarkably unchanged. Hall believed that ancient wisdom continued to matter because it addressed precisely those enduring questions. It did not offer final answers. It offered enduring methods of inquiry. This distinction is essential. Too often, modern discussions of esoteric traditions focus upon extraordinary claims while overlooking the extraordinary discipline from which those traditions emerged. Hall admired the mystery schools, not because they encouraged people to believe impossible things, but because they demanded intellectual humility, ethical responsibility, patient observation, and lifelong study. Wisdom, in his understanding, was never bestowed instantly. It developed gradually, requiring the individual to mature alongside the truths being pursued. In many respects, this may be the real secret teaching concealed beneath the immense diversity of the book. The greatest mystery is not the existence of forgotten civilizations, nor is it the possibility that ancient symbols contain hidden meanings. The greatest mystery is the human being whose capacity for understanding appears capable of continual development throughout life. Everything else in the book ultimately serves that larger vision. The mystery schools existed to cultivate it. Pythagorean philosophy sought to discipline it. Hermetic wisdom attempted to describe its relationship with the universe. Alchemy portrayed its transformation. The Qabbalah mapped its unfolding. The initiatory brotherhoods dedicated themselves to preserving the symbolic language through which each new generation might rediscover it for themselves. Seen from this perspective, the title The Secret Teachings of All Ages acquires a very different meaning. The secret was never a single doctrine hidden from humanity. It was the recognition that beneath the immense diversity of religions, philosophies, symbols, and civilizations runs a continuous search for the awakening of human consciousness. Every authentic wisdom tradition encountered throughout this journey points, in its own language, toward the same possibility: that human beings are capable of perceiving more deeply, understanding more clearly, and living more harmoniously when they learn to recognize the universal principles reflected throughout both nature and themselves. That is the thread connecting every page of Hall's work. Not Atlantis, not alchemy, not the tarot, not secret societies, but the enduring conviction that wisdom is not inherited through birth, purchased through wealth, or granted by authority. It must be cultivated through observation, reflection, discipline, and an ever-deepening awareness of the order woven into existence itself. For Hall, that was the true inheritance of the ancient world. And perhaps that is why, despite the passing of civilizations, the loss of libraries, and the countless transformations of history, the conversation begun by those distant teachers has never truly ended. It continues wherever someone chooses to look beyond appearances. Not in search of hidden secrets, but in pursuit of the understanding that the wisest traditions of humanity believed was always possible. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the secret teachings of all ages. I hope this timeless work has given you not only new ideas to consider, but also a deeper appreciation for the enduring wisdom that has connected civilizations across the ages. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please support Book Sound Better You by subscribing to the channel, giving this video a like, and sharing it with anyone who loves philosophy, history, and timeless books. Every bit of your support helps us continue bringing more of the world's greatest works to life. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next audiobook here on Book Sound Better You. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep growing.